What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for another Tottenham update and some big news to talk about today. But let's start off with Giovanni Lo Celso, as Mundo Deportivo say that Giovanni will not push to leave Tottenham as Ange Postecoglou has convinced him to stay. The Australian believes Lo Celso fits his team, having been impressed by him during the pre-season. Mucho Deporte saying that Tottenham boss Ange Postecoglou is delighted with what he's seen from Giovanni Lo Celso in pre-season, believes he will fit into his plans at Spurs. Therefore, the Australian has convinced Lo Celso to continue at Spurs despite him initially wanting to leave this summer. And there were quotes from Ange Postecoglou after the pre-season game today, and he was responding to reports in Spain that Lo Celso wants to move next season. He says, "You don't have to go to Spain, mate. You can just ask me. Yeah, I like Gio. He fits the way we play. I enjoy working with him, and he seems to enjoy working with us." So it looks as though Giovanni is going to be staying at Tottenham this season.
Yeah, very, very positive news. I think it's still dependent on potential. I think there's a couple of things. I think the selling club, the buying clubs haven't stumped up the kind of fee that Tottenham want, clearly. Otherwise, potentially a deal would have been in the works before the pre-season tour. But since he's gone on the pre-season tour, he's really impressed, clearly. All the Spurs fans can see it for themselves. He's had two great halves of football. I think logically he would really fit into Ange Postecoglou's system. I think he'd be perfect in one of the number 8 positions. I've always thought he's had quality, but there's always been question marks about, first of all, does he want to be here? And second of all, his injury record. But if we can kind of fix those two issues, I think we do have a really good player on our hands. And I'm personally excited about the prospect of him staying and providing an option in one of the number 8 positions. But we just got to hope that injuries don't get the best of him.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing for me. The injuries, for me, are the biggest issue with Giovanni Lo Celso. Obviously, there has been other issues surrounding him, like you say, about him wanting to be here and him fitting the system. But I think he clearly fits the system now. And look, I think he's going to be a benefit of the team and a really important member of the team this season. And he definitely has the quality to really thrive in an Ange Postecoglou system. So let's see how it goes this season.
I still think if someone does stump up the fee, though, I think we probably would still sell, in my opinion.
Yeah, it depends, to be honest. I think it depends how late in the window it is. It also depends if Tanguy Ndombele is in his plans and Højbjerg still stays. I mean, I think circumstances matter with this deal a lot. And I think if it comes later in the window and these players have maybe moved on and we still haven't got any replacements in, I think he stays.
Yeah, you're probably right. But if we come back from the tour now and, like, say, Napoli give us the whatever 20 or 25 million we're looking for, I think he would probably still accept it.
Interesting. I mean, I would kind of say no. Me personally, I would probably prefer to keep him now because he seems like he's somewhat happy here. Ange really likes him. He clearly fits the system. And if you bring in another player from outside of Europe or from out in Europe or something, there will still be those question marks until they actually get here and get to grips with them playing their football. So I'll probably side with keeping Giovanni as opposed to replacing him right now. Let's talk about Davinson Sanchez. We brought you the news a couple of days ago that he could be on the move to Spartak Moscow, but David Heitner says that the Premier League will discourage its clubs from doing business with their Russian counterparts after it has emerged that Tottenham had agreed a deal with Spartak Moscow for Davinson Sanchez. And he also went on to say that Sanchez is expected now to say no to Spartak Moscow and consider offers from elsewhere.
You know when they say, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
This is definitely one of them.
I think 15 was it 12 million for Sanchez getting off the books was probably too good to be true. We always thought this Russian deal was probably gonna hit the buffers, essentially, because of the country he's going to. He probably wouldn't want to go there. And also there are other issues as well with dealing with Russian clubs right now with the sanctions, all that kind of stuff. And alas, it seems there is a stumbling block. So we have to move on. I guess I don't think it's going to happen.
Lucky for us, there's a number of clubs willing to take him off our hands. So yeah, look, I think anything we can get, we take. I think the other clubs, I think we saw rumours for about 10 million, 9 million, something around that. Even that would be a great deal, in my opinion.
Yeah, true. For me, it's not even important, the fee, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you think that, though, this Davinson Sanchez deal is holding up bringing in a defender?
I would like to think it isn't, but it probably is, to be honest.
That's the frustrating thing, isn't it?
I wouldn't be surprised after this happens, then the move for centre-back accelerates. Well, I'm hoping, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm hoping this is the reason, in a way.
In terms of other centre-backs, though, like Joe Rodon, didn't see him at all on the tour get any minutes. Was he even there?
He was there, yeah.
So, I mean, he didn't get any minutes.
He was training separately.
And we haven't heard of any clubs interested as well. So, I mean, I don't know what's going on with that situation.
No idea, yeah.
Let's talk about Ivan Perisic. Matt Barlow of the Daily Mail is saying that Tottenham star Ivan Perisic has been told that he can leave if the right move comes up. Spurs signed Perisic on a free transfer from Inter Milan last summer, with the 34-year-old making 44 appearances for Spurs. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but also a bit of a shame in a way because he's performed so well. One of the standout performers in pre-season so far. I think that the job he's probably being asked to do in an Ange system as opposed to maybe a Conte system last year, strangely enough, I think it probably suits him more at this stage of his career to play the Ange system than it does the Conte system at wing-back, getting up and down the pitch all day long. And it is the kind of role he had in that Croatia team as well, in the World Cup where he played so well. In a weird way, I actually think it's very similar to how he played last season, just minus the defending. Well, yeah, and that suits him. I think, it suits him to a T because I had no problem with Perisic going forward. But the big problem is when he's asked to continually track back and be our width when it came to defending. Yeah. And I think that's always where he came unstuck. And now he has more cover. And obviously he still has to track back and do his defensive duties, but we're not relying on him to defend the wide areas. He's defending in the opposition's half as instead of defending in our own half. Yeah, and he's not continually tracking back all the time, and doing that. So I definitely think at his age, it's probably much more suited to him, just staying wide, getting crosses in, taking on his man, and dealing with those kind of things. I do think it's more suited to him. I'm not that opposed to him leaving if we are going to get a replacement. If we're not going to get a replacement for him, unless either we get a replacement or Hill is staying, one of those two. At the moment, it looks like Hill might be leaving, but obviously he's injured, so we don't know what's going on with him at the moment. I don't want to go into the season with just three wingers, essentially, just Solomon, Son, and Kulusevski. I think we would probably need one more. So if Perisic is leaving, I want to see him replaced, or I want to see Hill back involved. When you're looking at the options we have in our squad for the wingers, right? I don't think there's a player in our squad that can cross the ball better than Ivan Perisic. And when you're looking at the amount of crosses, especially early on in pre-season so far, how many crosses we're getting into the box from those areas, I mean, I think Perisic is probably the best suited to that role, probably in our squad. Yeah, I agree. I think short term, the way he, with both feet as well, he can whip him crosses with his left or his right foot and take set pieces as well. I think he would be a bit of an asset, and I wouldn't just, I think there were rumours of us cancelling his contract and stuff like that. I wouldn't do that because you might as well, if we got him for a year, you might as well keep him instead of just wasting all that money. But if we are going to get a bit of money for him and we can replace him, I'm not totally against that either, but I just think we shouldn't just be either chucking him away or not replacing him. Next, last but not least, let's talk about this Joe Lewis news now, as it's been doing the rounds around world media at the moment. First of all, Bloomberg say that British billionaire and owner of Tottenham Hotspur, Joe Lewis, has been charged with insider trading in the US. Lewis has surrendered to the US authorities after being charged with insider trading. The British billionaire turned himself in to federal authorities in Manhattan on Wednesday morning. The Financial Times say that Joe Lewis has been charged with 19 counts, including security fraud and conspiracy to commit securities fraud and make false statements. The Telegraph saying that the Premier League have confirmed that they are satisfied with Joe Lewis is not part of the ownership of Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs therefore face no threat of sanctions or even being forced to sell the club should Lewis be found guilty. Matt Law says that Joe Lewis gave up any significant control in Tottenham last year, and it has emerged that he is also given up control of ENIC, the company that owns Tottenham. The Premier League have confirmed that they are satisfied that Joe Lewis is not part of the Tottenham ownership and that he has nothing to do with running the club. Spurs therefore face no threat of sanctions, like I just said. A THFC spokesman said that this is a legal matter unconnected with the club and such. We will have no comment. And Abdullah Bullman says that QSI are closely monitoring the situation involving the insider trading charge of Tottenham Hotspur Joe Lewis and how it could speed up a possible sale of the club, but I don't really buy that at all. But it looks as though they think this will have no implications on Spurs. I think it will have some implications. What the implications will be remains to be seen. I think when it comes to, first of all, Tottenham from a public relations point of view, we had the Paratici debacle not so long ago where Tottenham put out a statement saying we were so surprised by this news and I can't believe it's happened. And when everyone knew that Paratici was set to be charged, I gather this probably has taken them... Well, actually, I don't even know if they're taken them by surprise because Joe Lewis had... removed himself in October 2022. So now all of a sudden you get the feeling that's probably with a view of what's happened Everything
yesterday.
always makes sense in the end, doesn't
exactly. So, it had that happened out of the blue. You're thinking, why is that happening? Everyone's probably thinking because he's getting old and, he wants to put the money with his family and whatever. But now, for sure, looking at this news, it was probably in line with this happening. But in terms of, the PR relations, in terms of other people wanting to deal with us with this going on, remains to be seen. Would it affect the NFL contract? That remains to be seen. They don't want to bring their brand into disrepute, and they've obviously got a long deal with Spurs, and if they're being indicted by the US government, federal government, that's a big deal, and that's not something that just can be swept away. And also with Spurs themselves, I don't think they're going to be directly implicated in anything. I don't think that's the situation, but just because he's relinquished control now doesn't mean he didn't do these things while he had control of Spurs. And if there's any sort of wrongdoing monetarily while he had control of Spurs, and they can link anything to ENIC or to Tottenham, which I think is unlikely. But if anything does come about, that anything is linked to Tottenham or ENIC while he was the owner, then that definitely will have bad implications. Let's just hope that never comes to pass. I'm sure they're clever enough to avoid that kind of situation. But it's terrible, terrible viewing for Spurs fans and Spurs as a football club. And it brings the ownership into the direct spotlight again for the fans, in my opinion, after a summer where they're looking to move on from Conte and Paratici and that whole debacle, and they want to kind of sweep that away and try and focus on the positivity of bringing in Postecoglou and going in a new direction and rebuilding the team on the footballing side. And now this news coming up, it's definitely going to, for a lot of fans, putting them directly in the firing line yet again, and I don't blame them.
Do you think Daniel Levy brings Joe Lewis back in a advisory manner?
Who knew that Joe Lewis's one call a day was him calling Daniel Levy and saying, just make sure you get a fee for Harry Kane, or the mate while he signs a contract. Apparently that was his one call a day. Who knew?
Yeah.
But look, it's a terrible situation.
But like in terms of like how it looks commercially to all these commercial partners that we have, like the NFL, like you mentioned, all the other commercial partners that we do have. I mean, it just looks terrible on someone like Daniel Levy, who's been in bed with Joe Lewis for so long now. And obviously they've been so close in a close knit with ENIC and Tottenham and all the business stuff that they've been through together. I mean, do you think that these kind of partners maybe look at Daniel Levy in a different way now?
There's a good chance. Look, you can't say anything for sure. There's nothing certain, but I think we know that Levy is known to be almost like a protege of Joe Lewis, and Joe Lewis gave him his big break when he was in his 30s, and things like that. So they clearly got a very close relationship, and it's hard to believe. I can't say anything definitively. I'm just saying it's hard to believe he didn't know what was going on, but you don't know. Obviously,
we said the same about Paratici as well.
Exactly. We just don't know. We don't know the ins and outs, but it's hard to believe he was completely blind to all of this. Everyone knows that insider trading is not something that's not common. It's a common occurrence within these things, but from what I gather, how the way it's happened with Joe Lewis is extremely brazen and very stupid and out in the open, and very there's very much concrete evidence as well.
These people think they're untouchable at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Multi billionaires. He's got a net worth of over £6 billion. You know what I mean?
And as well, apparently he's done this to just avoid paying people wages. He's just done this basically to pay them in certain ways, so that he's avoid paying them out of his own pocket. And so he's just given them information so they can invest the money and earn money that way, instead of him just giving them money himself, which he has. So, and that's why the prosecutor said this is completely unnecessary, because Joe Lewis is a very wealthy man, but this is what he's been doing basically. And by the way, this is no little thing that's happened. The US federal prosecutor has made a public statement. They don't just do that willy-nilly for shits and giggles. This is very serious, and it's very likely when they do this, they do it when they have very serious evidence, very concrete evidence. They don't just do it willy-nilly on a whim. They've been gathering this case for a long time, and I think it's probably very likely that he will be guilty, whether that means he sees prison time or just a fine. Everyone's saying it's very unlikely he'll see prison time, and that's probably true because he's 86 years of age, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Who knows? There are people his age who have gone to prison, so depends what he's found guilty of and all that kind of stuff. We'll have to wait and see, but it's definitely not a small situation for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the situation on Joe Lewis. I'm sure more news is going to come to light on this process as the days progress, but at the moment that's where we stand.
Do you think for fans though, does it put them in the ownership in the spotlight? Does it mean more protests and things like that?
I don't know,
Or
to
should
be
it?
honest. I think it probably should. I think it's just another series of events, another event to add to the long bow. But I think like Joe Lewis is not even part of the ownership anymore. But I think Daniel Levy probably, should he be painted in the same brush? I'm not sure, but I find it hard to believe. Obviously, I don't know anything, and it's hard to say yes or no. But I find it hard to believe that Levy didn't know what was going on.
I mean, like, yes, he's not technically the owner anymore, but we all know it was all just for paper's sake. It's obviously he still has like control. The trust is in his family's name. He obviously has a massive say in all that kind of stuff. And I think that when it comes to owners, I think fans have a right to want to like have question marks about who the owners of their football clubs are and what they're doing. And if the owner who was the owner for a long time, and by all intents and purposes, I mean, yes, on paper he's not the owner, but let's be honest, he is, and he's still got a massive stake. He's still got a lot of control and sway in ENIC, even though on paper right now he doesn't. He did up until October 2022, so it's not only a year ago. I think fans are well within their right to question the current ownership's suitability on the basis of this, even though technically Joe Lewis, you can say fans can, there are people who say, look, he's not an owner, he was nothing to do with the club, but I mean, do people really believe that?
Probably not, but I think that when you're looking at the ownership structure of Tottenham, I mean, I think they've done so many things now to call into question whether they're fit enough to run this club, and this is just another bit of evidence.
Yeah, this is
that.
like proper. No one's really questioned them breaking the law.
I get that, but they did hire Paratici, which I've refused to believe that they didn't know anything that was going on. What was going on with him?
But but they hired someone who break the law. This is them actively breaking the law. And
I understand that.
That's another level, surely.
I understand that is another level, and I think it's just another thing to the long list of why
Allegedly,
Spurs fans
allegedly breaking the law.
Okay, but it's another thing to the long list. You know what I mean? And I think Spurs fans should well be within their right to demand new change at this football club. That is your Tottenham update for today. Nothing else. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Let us know your thoughts on the Joe Lewis situation and all the other news stories that we have brought to you today. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.